All right. Good afternoon, everybody. It is noon here on the West Coast, 3 o'clock on the East Coast, and I think we're ready to get started. Obviously, if people are joining late, we're going to have a recording of this webinar and people can catch up to anything that they might have missed. But we're here today to talk about the kind of advanced touchscreen tools and techniques to help really streamline your checkout and turbocharge your point of sale. My name is Andy Smith. Very happy to be here and talk to you about the system. And my colleague joining me today is Bliss Desa, who is our head of sales and marketing. Bliss, you want to say hi?
Hey, everyone.
So I'm going to be driving the slides as we go through here, and Bliss will be working with me to talk about what we've got.
Perfect. So about a month ago on October 12th, Jessica and Lucas presented the first session of this two-part series on understanding and implementing touchscreen fundamentals. So this advanced session today will build on those basic skills and take your touchscreen functions to the next level. So we highly recommend you watch this basic session first because it does lay the foundation for this advanced session. Couple of things from a housekeeping perspective as we begin this webinar. So of course we are recording today's webinar and we will send an email out to you tomorrow with the link to this video recording along with this PowerPoint presentation that we're going through. So right here at the bottom right, you will be able to access the fundamental webinar recording directly so you can watch both. So know that you can find this recording and of course all of our recordings of all our previous webinars on our websites, Facebook and YouTube as well. Okay. Second thing is you are muted during this webinar, but you will have the ability to ask questions throughout this webinar as well. So at the bottom of your screen, there will be a Q&A. It's the icon with two little chat bubbles next to each other. If you click on that, you can start typing in your questions. So for the purpose of time, we will answer all of your questions at the end of the webinar. And if there is a question that's very specific to your store or your operation, we'll follow up with you directly after the session. Okay.
Yeah, but feel free to ask questions, ask away, because the more you ask us, the more we'll know exactly what we haven't been clear on or what we might be interested in specifically.
Yep, we love those questions. So as we begin, we do want to preface this webinar with, you may come away from this webinar learning a few new things and maybe you're excited and now have the knowledge and tools to execute them. But you may also come away from this advanced session feeling overwhelmed. So know that both are okay. Our biggest objective from this webinar is that you come away knowing what is possible to do in the system and then start considering where you can start to streamline your operational flow as you start thinking about these functions. So no, you can always reach out to Rapid to set up any of these touchscreen functions that you're seeing today or in previous webinars, or even to help you strategize what you might need to help streamline some of those operations.
Yeah, our job here is not to turn you into computer programmers. That's not what we want anyone to feel like they have to be. But some of the tools and techniques we're going to introduce today will, seem a little bit more like computer programming. You don't have to learn the specifics, but just know that that capability exists, and it just lets you know where to ask for help.
Totally. All right. So without further ado, let's run through our agenda. So we're going to start with editing the columns on touchscreen. Then we'll talk about the totals area and tell you more about what that even is. We'll talk about adding images to your touch buttons and provide a fun little resource on where you can find those images. We'll talk about our external button action, go through run pages, send keys, talk through custom actions, and then we'll jump into our Q&A.
Well, and gosh, when you look at those, I think a lot of those are probably Greek to most of the people on the call. These are not necessarily terms that you are familiar with already. So I just promise you at the end of the call, you're going to know what a lot of these things are and understand what we mean by them. So in the beginning, the first few things we're going to touch on here are not that complicated, but they're often overlooked when we do trainings on touchscreen. They're just things that are not always in people's kind of presence of mind. So we're just highlighting them and letting you know that these are capabilities that you can do things with. As you all know, as Counterpoint users, the touchscreens are highly configurable and customizable. A lot of what we did on the first webinar was talk about some of the basic ways you could change the buttons on your screen. Well, one of the things we didn't really talk about then is you can also change the columns of data that appear on your touchscreen. So what I mean are the yellow highlighted things. You know, when you're ringing up items, what do you see? Item number, the description, the quantity. You can actually edit those, and I'm going to show you right now how to do that. You do it directly in the touchscreen. You know, a lot of the things we covered on the last webinar and even today will be using touchscreen editor, you know, the button editor in the system to change. But this is one thing you can actually do right on your live touchscreen. I'm going to open up our my live touchscreen here and show you an example of how you do this. So this is my garden demo. We, you know, have solutions for many different industries. I'm using the garden demo just because I have some of the functionality we want to show already built into this platform, but it is easy it is easy to do, and I see Melissa just asked a question. If there's a question that I can answer in stream, I'll try to. When you change your touch screens, there's a trick to saving them so that they become the standard. Then everyone you save it as your default. I'll touch on that in a second. So look, when I'm looking at my touch screens here, all I have to do is go to any of the column headings and right button click, and it opens up Column Designer. When I click on Column Designer, you'll see on the right side, this is all very similar to other forms and functions within Counterpoint, but you see the ones that you're showing currently on the right-hand side, and you see an almost daunting list of possibilities on the left here. So it's just, there are so many things that you could add to your touch screen. And just to give you one example, I could add, for example, the tax amount allocated and just move that over by hitting add. Puts it at the end, and I could of course change where that is in the lineup of columns. When I do it, you'll see it adds that other column here, and these are all movable fields. So if I search between description and quantity, if I go in there, you'll see where my cursor turns to a line. I could drag that over and make more room for that tax allocated amount. You can also go into that same column editor and change how things line up. Maybe on the column option tab here for tax allocated amount, I don't really need the word allocated to appear. So I just wanted to say tax amount and hit OK. And it just changes that header. When you're ready to answer that question from Melissa, when you're ready to save this, you right button click again and just save as, and it will automatically put in default, but save it as your default. And that becomes your standard column headings for this touchscreen. So good to do. If you don't have the right security level, you won't be able to do those column headings and changes, but you know, anyone with a kind of more accessible, like system admin or manager should have the right to do those. And if you don't, that's something that you can change in your security settings. I'm not going to really modify mine, and the next time I launch it, it'll go back to the old way because I'm not saving it. All right. Going back to our presentation now and pick up where we left off. Another thing you can change on your system is the total section. Again, oftentimes a thing that we don't spend a lot of time just talking about possibilities, but in some of our industries that we work with, we've even already customized, for example, for gun ranges, there's a way to show the person's membership and the date that their waiver expired, right, in the total section. And this is what appears at the bottom of the touchscreen. Just know that you don't have to go with what is provided. There's an opportunity to modify this and enhance it. There's also some out-of-the-box options. These you do change in the touchscreen button editor. When you go in, you'll see one of the tabs across the top is for totals, and there's some preloaded in. There's some defaults. We have our default layout is the one that your system typically would show, and that could even be the enhanced version that we've already done for particular industries. But any of the other ones that are in that folder, you could try and see how they look. Just click on them in preview, and it will show you kind of what that would look like. You can also notice when you do that, you might find that that totals is too far up or too far down on the screen. So it's easy to make adjustments to that. There's this little HTML height slider. You can slide it over a little bit and hit preview. It'll move that total amount up so you can make sure it's landing in the right spot on your touch screen. So in terms of just using the ones that are out of the box, that is very useful. But if if you want to have a customization, let's say, for example, a store does really varied pricing for different types of customers. And when I put that customer on the ticket, I want to know what their customer category is, or I want to know what their loyalty points are. Well, that's something that we could write to appear in that totals area. Some minor customization. We would do it in the HTML code of how that appears. So with that being said, we're going to go on to the next enhancement.
So we have a resource where you can add images to your touchscreen buttons. And so, you know, oftentimes this is just to make it usable and easy for your cashiers to click on a button and have a visual example of what that's referring to. So we have found this flaticons.net. It's a great tool that you can utilize to add these images to your buttons. So once we click on that, it will pop up flaticons.net, and you can just search for an icon, let's say customer, for example, and it will give us all of the different customer icons that it suggests. So all really fun. Let's, I guess, select the guy with the little tie or the business card. That's perfectly fine. um, and on the screen, you can adjust the specific size that you want to download. You know, the default on these is white. They don't have a background, so they flow perfectly in your touchscreen buttons. You can change the color, you know, if you want them to be bright orange or whatever it is. So these are really great to have a consistent flow of buttons across your touchscreen, and you can just download them and upload them. And we do cover how to get these on in our fundamentals webinar.
And the magic is they're free.
Yep.
So it's a really good tool if you're trying to build out buttons and have icon driven buttons. You can find icons. It's a great resource for icons. Not the only one that I've ever used, but it's the one I go to first almost every time.
Awesome. So our overview of button capabilities. So this is a slide that we covered in our fundamentals webinar as a comprehensive list of button capabilities. So we just wanted to provide a refresher. Now, at the base level, each button performs an action, right? And these are all examples of an action a button can perform. So, you know, creating a filtered list, a hyperlink, you know, adding an item. So all of these are actions. And of course, throughout this webinar, we will refer to them as button actions. So that way we're staying consistent with our terminology. So one specific button action that we didn't cover in our fundamentals webinar is external. So an external button allows you to reference a function outside of Counterpoint, and that button will launch the specific link or property when you tap on it. So it's really easy to set up. You know, we have our action or our button action as external. Our caption is just a reminder for us to know, hey, this is what it's doing. So it's bulk materials calculator. And then our command down here at the bottom is the link that we want it to launch. Okay. So
Yeah, you
now
can literally copy that from your browser and paste it right in there.
there are many instances you might want to use a button action like this, you know, maybe to jump into your e-commerce site or to quickly, you know, check availability and cost on your supplier's website. You know, just click and launch, and now you can search from there. You might link to an online calculator like we're doing for the purpose of this webinar, a bulk materials calculator, which we'll show you in just a moment. You might want to launch an external time card or scheduling system that you have to have employees just click and clock in really quickly, you know, or simply to pull up a calendar tool that you use to schedule appointments, classes, or deliveries for your customers. So, lots of different ways to leverage these, and I'm sure there's a ton more different things you can think of that we haven't summarized in this slide as well.
Yeah, when you're pasting things into that command line, it could be as simple as a document on your, like, so let's say you don't have a web-based calculator for something you need. You created a spreadsheet to do that. Well, you could actually connect that command line to that document on your hard drive, and it opens up that document when you push the button. So it's just a way of expanding way beyond just the capability of Counterpoint and letting other functions appear. We use these all the time. You may already have buttons on your system that are external buttons. You didn't even know it.
Yep. So let's see kind of,
It's
yeah,
it's
how that.
it's it's fun to say it. It's even funner to see it. So it's really simple. You've got that bulk materials calculator here. All it does is it opens up my browser and takes me to that website instantly. So no other special capability there. It's just basically doing what I told it to do. I could run a calculator and figure out how much mulch or soil this customer needs for the space that's involved. And then I could just close that out and paste that amount into my quantity. Imagine though, all the things it might be really helpful to be able to check another resource when you're doing things on the screen. So that's just, to me, that was one of those mind blow kind of functionality. Wow, I never even thought about that, but it opens up the door to lots of possibilities.
Yep.
I
So
apologize. I'm going to bounce back to my webinar. I'm the worst at changing screens. They should never let me drive.
you're very quick at them, Andy. All right. So now for the fun part, run pages. So what is a run page, right? Well, a run page allows you to pretty much have one button execute a series of buttons in a sequence. So the general purpose of a run page is taking something that might have multiple clicks to it and turning it into one click. So we especially love to use run pages on the sales and project management side because it's a creative way that we can solve problems for specific customers. So there's many different ways you can create a run page, and oftentimes you're just combining multiple button actions to form one seamless flow. And we'll talk about exactly what what our run page does and an example that we have. But as you start thinking about run pages, really ask yourself, is there something that you do in Counterpoint or something even your cashiers may have said, hey, I feel like I'm clicking too many times to get to this one page. Most likely that's something you can easily convert into a run page where it does all of those functions automatically and you just have one or two clicks in that process.
The biggest driver there is doing the same thing over and over again, where you have certain things that you do repeatedly that are always pretty much the same. The quantities may change, other little nuances may change, but it's the same fundamental idea. That's a great candidate for a run page.
Yep. So here's the example of the run page that we're going to walk through. So this, of course, each of these can be 4 separate buttons that perform individually, but we're going to combine them into one seamless run page. So step 1 for us is prompt to look up a customer. So we add our customer to the ticket. Number 2, change the line type to an order because of course our default is sales. So we know when we're doing something, we want to convert that to an order. Open a filtered lookup of items in one category. So we can select an item in a whole category. And then once that item is chosen, add in the delivery fee for that item. Okay, so let's take a look step by step on how we set this up. So first, we want to define the button that we want to launch into the run page. So my bulk delivery or bulk materials delivery button has an action of run page. So that button action will prompt me to run into my run page, which I've defined as RP-bulk materials. So for run pages, you will want to have a specific code to define them. For example, all of our run pages start with RP dash, and then what the run page clue is. So that's really to help you easily find and reference all of your run pages and easily associate them with different buttons. Okay, now let's look into our run page itself. So every action that we use in this run page is a button action that we have covered during our fundamentals webinar. So I won't spend too much time on each of these, but the run page here will simply combine multiple of those button actions and will execute them in the order that we place them. So I'm going to go through what our series of steps are here. So button number 1 is add our customer. And so our button action is customer from lookup. So it'll prompt me to select a customer from all of my customer lookup. Button 2 is my order line. And so my button action is add order line. And again, very simple button action there, and it'll convert it from my sale line to my order line. Button 3 is to do a filtered item from lookup. So my button action here is item from lookup. And then at the bottom, I can edit what my filter is. And so I'm going to select my filter in my bulk materials item category. So when we're running through this run page, you'll see all of my bulk materials pop up. And
And if
lastly,
I should point out just on this filter, if you're not familiar with how to use filters like this, if you right button click, you can add other arguments and parameters to filter based on, it doesn't have to be a range of things. It could just be one thing. So if you look at our advanced reporting webinar, that actually talks a lot about how do you work with filters and these forms to put in parameters that make sense for you.
good point. Awesome. And then our fourth button is to add our delivery item. So in this case, I just have an item that's defined as bulk delivery. So my button action for this is simply item. And then at the bottom, I've defined my item as a bulk delivery. And for this specific one, I want to pause at quantity. Now, with my bulk delivery item, I have different zones that I'll want to select from that you'll see in just a moment here. So I want it to pause so I can select that specific zone to ring up for that customer.
So let's take a look at that in operation. Again, talk about how we set it up, and then we're going to show you exactly how it works. So in my example here, I've got that button, bulk materials delivery, and this is a function this particular store does all the time. So they wanted to create the button for it. So I'm going to click on that run page. First thing it does is prompt me for the customer, and I can pick any customer. Since Tom's highlighted here, I'll just use him. It now gives me a lookup of all my bulk materials. You can see everything that it pulled up was from the bulk category. And so I could go and find things. And again, it already highlighted the last one I picked, which was humic compost. So I'll use that. Asked me to enter my quantity and my alternate unit for that. So I'm going to get 15 cubic yards of material. And then it prompts me for the delivery charge. Now, there's lots of ways stores do delivery. This is just one way. So for, a dump truck full of material, you might have different charges depending on how far away you are. So I used alternate units to just define the different zone fees. We're going to assume that Tom lives in zone 2. So all those things I did are basically the execution of that run page. You could have more steps. One of the people that asked a question was how many steps can you have? Like I could have it next automatically prompt for the ship to address. That would be a very logical one. And so, you're not limited by anything except the number of buttons on the screen. So right now I've got an array of 4 by 6. So you could have 24 steps in my run page here. Most people would never do that many. It's usually I see 4 or 5 as kind of the top end of taking you through a run page.
Yep, and one thing to point out here is, you can start a run page at any point in time. It doesn't have to be, at the start of your transaction. You could be halfway through where you have a customer and some items on your ticket, and now you realize you need to do a bulk materials delivery. You can just click on that and pick that run page up anywhere at any time. Yep. And one last precautionary thing as we kind of talk through run pages, there are certain things that can what we call break a run page or prevent it from continuing. One example is an external button action, excuse me, where once you click that, of course, it's going to take you to an external page and it doesn't have a continuation after that. So that is something that can end your run page flow. So oftentimes you're just going to want to test through those different um, run pages, create them, test them, and make sure that it's going to allow you to continue through your sequence.
Yeah, when I'm building them, and most of the ones we did in this demo, I've built specifically to address a customer request or a pain point they were having, or just showing them different cool ways to do things. But when I'm building a run page, I typically, if it's going to have 4 steps, I'll build the first 2 steps first and then test it. And then go back in. Once I know that that works, then I'll add the 3rd step and test it, or I'll add the 4th step. And I've had situations where, you didn't realize something was going to bounce you out of the run page. Maybe there's a specific prompt that has to be entered in and it disrupted. So if you're finding that a particular function takes you out of the run page, maybe you can move that one to be the last step. And then you can automatically not have to worry about that stopping, because it's the last step anyway. So you have options, but if you do them one at a time and test after each one, you'll easily know that you're where the problem might have been introduced. The other thing I'll mention is, when you're looking at, even in the system right now, you may have like an order process set up in your system. I have on my landscape tab, starting a landscape function, and this does a couple of steps, but maybe I want to add a step to it. So you can absolutely, you'll find places in the system that have run pages already, and you can use that as a basis. You can copy that button somewhere else and then go change it.
Yep, and one last thing as we're closing up on run pages is Andy has set up this really cool function where you can have quote templates and you can create a run page as a quote template, and I'll let him walk you through that one right now.
Yeah, so the idea here is if you do the same kind of thing, and again, there's no 2 businesses are alike, but let's say, there was a standard 5 things that you always added to a ticket when a customer wants to do something. Well, I just created a template, which is just a run page that's going through 5 items, and it's going to prompt me for quantity after each one. I think I actually might have even more than 5 here, but I'm just putting random things on to show you how it does it. But when I hit that template, it adds the first thing and lets me enter my unit. It adds the second thing and lets me enter this item here is actually a sales kit. So when I enter, let's say 1 tree, it actually starts asking me sales kit questions. So I'm actually combining capabilities in the system, a run page, with using sales kits to add multiple items to a ticket. So it just added that kit. And now I'm going to add some mulch, and I'm going to add this other pot. So it's just a quick way to build a ticket that you do all the time. And of course, this is fully editable now. If I wanted to come in and change a quantity, I could do that. But just know that as you're considering what do you do with run pages, that's a nice, if you have those repetitive things that you have to do all the time, quick, easy way to kind of systematize that. All right. Going to take you back to the presentation. We're going to go into the next level of complexity. So run pages, to think about them, it's just existing functions one step at a time, right? And doing them in sequence. Now let's talk about probably the most advanced thing we're going to talk about in today's presentation, and that is send keys. Send keys, not something you probably have ever heard about. If you do, then you have a little programming background. This might be really something that you want to latch onto. But think of send keys. It's a utility or script that Microsoft provides that allows you to emulate keystrokes. So if you think about Counterpoint, you open up a form, you have to type something into it, or you have to select an option like OK or search, or whatever the various things are. So you're always using a keyboard and mouse to do things in the system. Well, send key is a way to emulate what the keyboard can do. So you can create a send key that automatically enters a letter or a combination of letters or a function key, or control shift or, shift F5. It would just be different ways that you do that. Of course, if you're just typing words, you're just typing the letters right on into the send key instruction. But if you're doing like a hotkey like Alt or Control, or you're doing more of a function key, there's a format. And this article from Microsoft is a good overview of the way send keys work. So if you ever want to look at that, it's a good guide for how to use send keys. We're going to show you how you use those in our system. And again, this is not to turn you into programmers, but I want you to know like that when you are looking at how to automate functions in the system, if there's the need to put in a value, that's something you can do very simply. Let's use an example. And so first thing, the send key script or capability is already in your system. It's a function that is loaded. It's loaded in an area of your computer that's called the top shelf folder. In my system, it's under Program Files, Radiant Systems Counterpoint, and then top level system actions. It's in the actions field. If you were to just search your server hard drive, you would find send keys. So search for send keys and it'll find it. You're going to see later on where when we're creating a send key button, basically, I have to tell the system where to find that program because it has to run that script. So let's look at an example. And the way, when you're going to use send key, the best way to approach it is to actually do that function in your system manually. And when you're doing it, notate every step of the way. You want to see where the cursor lands, the exact keystrokes you enter in, and how do you move it to the next field? How do you get out of that form? So the example I'm going to use as my send key example is, today, if I want to change the price on something, let's say I want to mark something down as clearance, I would highlight the item. I would go into my more buttons. I would go to item functions. I would hit price override by percent. That's the key right there. I would enter in the percentage. Cursor automatically puts me right in that 40% when that form opens up. I would type in 40, and then I would hit tab. I would enter in clearance, and then I would either select OK with my mouse, or I'd just type, I'd have the enter command, use my enter key on my keyboard to do it. Now, when you're running through that simulation, this is just to notate all the steps that you have to do and where the cursor falls. Do it only on your computer. Don't use the touch screen. Don't use your mouse, because send key is instructions for a keyboard. So you have to have a key to do each thing. Now, one important kind of thing that can make send keys work really well for you is, in addition to this green field highlighted here, that just means you can always use enter to do that function. That's the default function if you hit enter. So all I have to do is hit the enter key. But I also have a hotkey. The O is underlined, so that could be either Alt O or Control O that would execute that. The cancel would be Alt A or Control A. I don't remember which one it is right now, but the idea is that you can have the system do things that you would otherwise use a mouse for, because there's a hot button for it. So I can turn that mouse click into a keystroke. All right, so I did my homework. I know all the steps necessary to do my send key. And so what I'm going to do is, the 4 clicks to do this price override, enter the percentage, enter the clearance reason code, and hit OK, I'm going to just turn into a single button push. So how do I set that up? The first thing I do is create a run page. So send key is always the keystrokes that are going to be entered into a form. Well, there's the instruction to enter the keystrokes, and then there's the form that you're going to enter it into. So there's always 2 steps, at least 2 steps when there's a send key. And the send key, therefore, is always done on a run page because you have to do the 2 buttons in sequence. Now, this is one area where people will get a little bit confused, but when you when you're creating a send key, the first thing you do is define the keystrokes. Then you define the form that those keystrokes are going into. That's not the way our human brains work. Normally we open up a form and we type things into the blank spaces. So this is one area where the computer kind of does it backwards, and that will, just knowing that will make working with send keys a lot easier. That's when I talk to people who have tried to do this and it's messed up, that's where they do it. So let's first define the send key. We're telling it the keystrokes that we want to put into that price adjustment form. First, my action for the send key is an external action. We already talked about what an external action button can do. And in this case, it's launching that send key utility. This is just the place in Counterpoint where that is. It's, remember, in that top level system actions folder, and you can search for it. Just click on that ellipsis and you can find that in your system. Once you've found it in one of these, once you create one send key, you can go in and copy and paste that location into other buttons. It's real easy to reuse it. I can even copy this button and use it for other things, like I want to change the keys that are being entered in and have it plug it into a different form. So use copy and paste as often as you can to minimize how much things you have to type. But in this case, I created a send key that is going to type the number 40, then it's going to do a tab, then it's going to type the word clearance, and then it's going to do an enter key. Notice that function keys like add, tab, and enter are in brackets. The keystrokes that are just being entered into the form are just typed. There's no other special, like you don't have to put them in parentheses or exclamation points. If you had special characters like Alt, Control, there's little characters that indicate those. And again, we can help you with those, or that link that I provided to the Microsoft site talks about them all. So we created the instructions. The next thing we're going to do is create that, identify the form that we want to type it in. So I just picked the price override % action button for this button. Now, talked about doing them in order. So once you created that, you're just going to save it and test it and make sure it works. Really simple once you think about it. Let's look at it in operation now. So here in my demo, I'm going to add an item to this transaction. I'm going to add a plant on my system and highlight it. So now I want to mark that down as on clearance. And so I have that send key set up right here on my discount tab. So that 40% clearance is the send key. So instead of having to hit, if I were going to do this manually, I would go into more buttons, item functions, price override, and I'd key all that information in. You know, that would be the normal behavior, but I'm not going to do that in this case. I've got my send key, so I can just go into my discounts and hit the 40% clearance. Bam, it's done. So all of those keystrokes were merged into one thing. Now remember that send key is, you know, the two steps on a run page. So you could even combine send key with run pages and actually do multiple things all in the same run page. So no limit, but that's, you know, I want you to get comfortable walking before you try to run the marathon. And this is one of those situations where create a couple of send keys, then create a couple of run pages, and then you can start thinking about merging them together and doing them all in the same button. These are really powerful tools to make life easy for a store, you know, because buttons can do so many things like navigate you on the page, you know, run a routine that you do all the time, like repricing or things like that. You can really use the send key and the run page as a way to make your checkout a lot smoother and more streamlined. So let's go back to our presentation.
Yeah, so as we talk through all of these advanced functions, you know, like run pages and send keys, and we've shown you all of the button actions that your system can do, know that we can take that one step further, right? We can create custom code that goes beyond any of these functions that you've seen in this webinar and the previous webinar. And we can program these custom action buttons. To preface, only skilled programmers should create these buttons, you know, and they allow for functions you might not even think of. So, you know, a lot of the enhancements we as Rapid have created have these custom button actions. So some of these may already exist in your touchscreen and you may not even know of them. You know, one thing to consider here is if you're looking for something to execute differently than what you might be able to create in a run page or utilize a send key for, right? If you're kind of crunching all of these things and you're not able to find one set thing, contact us. Maybe we can point you in the right direction, or if it doesn't exist, it's a custom action that most likely we can create, right? So all of these are tools, and Rapid as a team, right? We have this team of programmers that can build these things, and we're very experienced with creating a lot of these button actions as we create our enhancements.
Yeah, I will tell people it takes a village. And one of the things that's nice about Rapid is we've got a large group of employees that are all with different skill sets. And some of us are creative problem solvers. And the creative problem solvers are the ones who, you give them a task like, a routine task that you have to do over and over again, and they'll find you 3 or 4 different ways you can solve and make that easier. Other people they just really understand the rules of the system and they'll color within the lines. So, you'll find people in the organization that are really good at thinking of ways to solve specific things. I always encourage people, feel free to call me, feel free to call your care team lead. The more senior in the organization, the more just exposure to different customer problems and solutions they might have. So especially when you're interacting with the help desk, understand that the help desk often is focused on solving very specific problems in a systematic way. They're not necessarily going to have all the crayons in the box to know all the different things that you might be able to harness. So don't feel bad if you think that there's a way to solve something, to go beyond just the initial help and talk to somebody like a programmer or someone like Bliss or I about what's possible in the system. And we're really happy to get those calls.
Yeah, we really are. And Andy mentioned this earlier, and he's really great with analogies. And I think it's really worthwhile to bring it up in this webinar as well. The functions, the button actions that you saw earlier, right? Those are like utilizing crayons in a coloring box. And now through this advanced webinar, you've kind of gained your first set of oil paints, and you're starting to, paint with them a little bit. And then soon you'll advance into a Bob Ross painting. And I loved that analogy. So, it can really, you can utilize all of these as tools in your toolkit to further enhance what you can do within your touchscreen. Awesome. And then our last little bit here is words of caution. We talked about this in our basic session, but we do have to talk about it again because they are so important. First one here is making edits is a huge responsibility. Take time to consider what you're creating, and if it really is necessary, and all of the functions and edits that you're implementing are going to impact others on your team. So really think through them strategically and think about all of the different circumstances that they might come into play. Test your button pages in practice company before implementing them in the live company, especially working with things like run pages or send keys. They can be a little tricky, and you're going to want to kind of do it step by step and test them multiple times to make sure, one, things are working correctly, and two, there aren't, actions that are kicking you out of that workflow. So always, play around with it a little bit, get it right before putting it into live. The other resource you can use is just to create a copy of the whole touchscreen that you have, the touchscreen code. Make changes to that touchscreen code, so that way you're not messing with your default one that all of your cashiers are using, right? That can be your little playground as you experiment with all of these different functions. Okay, save periodically. Cannot stress this one enough. As you execute some of these advanced functions, you will need to kind of pause and maybe write it out and really think through what you're doing. You don't want the system to close out or something while you're thinking or planning through this. So just save every time you're walking away or every 10 minutes or so that way you're not losing any of your hard work. And lastly, do not delete any button pages unless you have personally created them. You don't want to override any of your colleagues' work that they might have put a lot of time into creating that workflow. And of course, that goes hand in hand with do not override any rapid created button pages or workflows that we might have. A lot of what we've created are created for your business with intention, and they have important value in how your operations run. So there might be custom button actions that were created, and built directly into
Yeah.
those pages.
Yeah, we can run error checks or other things that are looking for other conditions in the system that are flag a problem or allow a transaction to complete. Those are all things that you may not even be aware of on a button, even a button that looks like it has an obvious function like the pay button on your screen. So just know that that could be any button you already see there could be being used in a very specific way. And feel free to contact us if you want to change a button and you're not comfortable, you want us to verify that it's not one that's going to have any impact in your system. Again, we're happy to do that. One customer self-help thing, when you're trying to look at buttons and you see there's a whole long list of the different actions that buttons can use, and sometimes you don't necessarily know just by the words that they have what that button action means in the system. That's where NCR Counterpoint Help is a really useful resource. I just went to the ncrcounterpointhelp.com. It's their online help, and I just searched button action. You can see gave me a whole laundry list of results that relate to different buttons, and I could narrow that down, but gives you an idea of what the different buttons can do. Here's a little description of what custom buttons are, and again, can show you different capabilities.
Awesome. So let's jump into some Q and oh, sorry.
Well, just kind of in summary of next steps, feel free to rewatch this recording or any of the earlier ones, especially the one that was the foundation class for this one. It's just great to continue to reinforce your skills. These are functions you may not do often, but the more you do them, the more you're going to master them. When you're ready to kind of go in and start thinking about how you want to do your touch screens and really improve them. I always use as a really good first step, talking with your team, having them identify things that take too many clicks or things that they think are cumbersome or things that they think they do all the time over and over again, and maybe that would be an area. If you start it from the problem, then it's easy to figure out if there's a viable solution. Sometimes the solution is really simple. Too many clicks to get to that price override. I could copy the button and put it somewhere else, and I don't have to create a run page or send key. But when you're doing things and you want it to be really streamlined, or I want the clerk to only be able to add 40% and only put the reason code in for clearance, so they can't do anything else, then the send key and run page is a really appropriate solution there. So start by understanding the problem and getting that feedback directly from your team. Then go in and start playing around with them. This is an area where there's nothing wrong with exploring and trying those action buttons and trying them and see what happens. You're just always doing it in a copy of your touchscreen, so you're not changing your main one and can always revert back to it. Even as we prepared for this webinar, we created duplicates of our normal touchscreens because if we go in and change things, we don't want it to change our normal buttons. All right, and feel free to contact us, Rapid Cares at rapidpos.com, your help desk, which would be support@rapidpos.com, or any of us on the call. You'll have our contact information as well.
All right, now let's jump into some questions.
Yeah, please feel free to type questions in the Q&A or in the chat. Both are fine. We can see both of them. Do we have any questions yet?
We
Bliss?
have a few questions that we can start off with. So if you have any other questions, please type them in now. So the first question here is on the touchscreen configuration side, what does the allow item entry checkbox do?
Oh, okay. So let's go into that. I'm going to just open up my button editor here. The button we're talking about is when I go into the buttons tab here, this allow item entry checkbox. We already talked about in the first webinar, and we referenced it earlier today, the default checkbox. The default checkbox is the one that's going to be the main screen. There's only one of those, but most of your button pages in the system will have that allow item entry checked. If I go to any of my buttons here, there's my tender button, it still has allow item entry. What that does is it allows this to be visible on the screen. So it shows that search and the field where you could key in an item number. And again, there's very few reasons I can imagine where you don't want to allow that. So I would just always have it checked, pretty much.
Perfect. So we have another question here that can you set manager permissions per button?
So there's a couple different ways to accomplish that, and I'll show them to you in a second. I just was going to go back to my main page here so we can look at that. So I have a button on my screen called Manager. And so what Manager does is it requires a different level employee to log in order to get to the functions behind that button. So for example, I can write a rule that says you have to be at a certain security level to access these functions. All right, and then I create basically, I'm using the manager firewall run page, and that manager firewall run page, I apologize that these are grayed out, but I'm gonna try to make them look a little bit easier to notice on the screen here. When you're doing run pages, this is something that you'll find in the system. They always come in gray, and I always change the colors for the ones I use all the time so I can read them on the screen. So we're basically just entering sales rep and then taking me to the next button page that I've entered in. And if the person doesn't have the right security level, they won't be able to get to that button page. So out of the box today, this is a way to do it. And you can see on the button page of mine, it takes me to a certain discount. So this would be a way, if I didn't want my regular team to be able to do price overrides or line discounts or any of those things, I can put those on the manager page, and a manager would have to get it to that, log in to get to that. So that's just one approach to that. We've had enough customers ask for that too, that we can create the ability, like a custom action that basically authenticates the manager level before you let a function happen. So there's two ways up that mountain, but both are good, viable choices. If there's a follow-up question to that, feel free to ask it.
Yeah, great question. We do have another question here. Can you use send keys to have the customer notes pop up?
You could, but you really don't need to. You mean the existing notes? If that's the question, like notes that you may already have in the system, you could create a button which is effectively a run page that's going to execute a series of steps. And the way I would assess whether that's a viable choice, I have two versions of Counterpoint running, just so you know, in the system. If this is so in the demo, I can toggle between a live touchscreen and my touchscreen editor. In a real system, in a single, if you were only logged in, you wouldn't be able to do both at the same time. It always makes you close your touchscreens to edit the touchscreen. But in my environment here, I have a development system running and a demo system both running at the same time. So just if that's confusing at all, what you would want to do to test out that notes feature is I've got the notes button here. So go through the clicking sequence. So let's, just for giggles, let's create a transaction that has a note. In fact, I'm just going to pull up an existing order that I have in the system. So this is an order that I created in the system. I'm going to edit it, and I'm just going to add a note to it. So in order to test the note function, I want to learn what it's going to take to recall. So I'm just going to create a date time stamp thing and call it a note. And save that. So now that we've saved a note on this, actually, sorry about that, I hit the wrong button. Let's save the top. There we go. So now if you see in the system, this document has a note. If I want to create the function to recall that note and view it, let's look at the keyboard, the keystrokes involved. So the first thing I do is create a function button called notes, and it puts me in that note ID, right? And the function next would be to move the cursor to the next ticket, and it says in parentheses page down. Well, page down is a keyboard stroke on my keyboard, so that tells me that I could easily create a send key that would open up this form and do page down to get to the first note that's visible. Does that make sense? You're basically validating that with keystrokes, I could get to this document. And once I've written those steps, it's a pretty easy send key. I just have to know what the send key code is for page down. And as I mentioned, I would then go to that IBM document that I linked to earlier, and it would tell me how to work with those, how to work with that send key. And just to give you an example, this is that I'm sorry, I say IBM, the Microsoft article on send keys. So the page down is here. So it would be that would be the send key instruction right there.
Perfect. And that's a really good question as you're really starting to think of this in an advanced way. Play around with it if you want, or just reach out to us and we can really kind of work with you one-on-one to help get that set up. Okay.
So I love being on the hot seat because it is actually really fun. So keep asking. And if I didn't answer your question 100%, that's okay too. Ask for a clarification or follow-up. I see two in here. One's really easy to answer. Do we have recordings of our previous webinars? Absolutely, we do. And there's a couple places where you'll see that. Any Rapid POS website, Rapid Garden, Rapid Gun, all of the different verticals that we have supported sites for. On those websites, you'll see a folder called webinar, and you can watch them there. You can go to our YouTube channel, and then we have a training site called counterpointuniversity.com. They're also all there. So Bliss is really good at posting those in all of those locations.
Yes, and one thing to add, they are on our Facebook pages as well. And many of you may or may not know, but our new Rapid POS site is now launched. So there is a blog and webinar section on that site, as well as a 24/7 support link that you can click at the top. So as you're looking for support, that's an easy way to find our number and email as well.
Okay, one other question was, how do you edit the name and the face of an existing button? That's really simple. So when I'm in this button editor, and I apologize because of the way I connect in, when I'm working on that screen, it usually stays on the screen, but sometimes when I click a button on the button editor, it makes it disappear. So the blinking of that going on and off is not something you would have in your system. It's just because of the way I'm remote connected into this demo. If I wanted to change that title, I would see right here the caption field. That's what's showing on that title. So I could just type anything. I could put discount by %. And then the way to see it on the button is hit the preview button on the bottom, and you can see it changed. If you wanted to add a picture to that button, let's say I've got pictures. This little ellipsis here next to the image will take you to the image folder. So these are all the images. You can see I've got lots of different images for different things. So you can find an image here. And if you downloaded one from that icon site where you would have done it, I even download them to my desktop. I would find that image on my desktop. It'll automatically copy it into this configuration images folder. But if I wanted to put a tree image on that button, again, I selected that image and preview, and you'll see it put that tree on there. That's a really ugly picture, but you get the idea. That's why I like the white images, the solid color images. Just they make the system look cleaner and more modern. But hopefully that answered your question, Blaze. And if you have a follow-up, those are the great questions. I can clarify more about it. The hint is another one that people often ask about, and I know we talked about that in the last one. If I find hints distracting because when I use the mouse, I don't want to see how these pop up with additional entries, enter discount %. Those can be really helpful to someone, or they can be distracting. So you always have the option to just not put any value in there, and then you won't see it.
Perfect. There was a question that you already answered from earlier. You had typed it out, but I think for the purpose of this recording, it's nice to have it answered live. When you save a default for the touchscreen columns, is that for user, station, or does it save globally?
So it is for this touch screen. So you might have multiple stations that are running your standard touch screen. I have this one's called Newlon. It's just the name I had for it now. And now this version of it actually is called Webinar. So even though I have another touch screen in my list of available touch screens, that is called Newlon. If I'm changing it in Webinar, any changes I make to these column headings only apply to Webinar. You can save this. Let's say you wanted this to apply in multiple places, just like other functions in the system. I could save as and call it, standard, and then I could load it on each touchscreen as well. So just because it's not automatically updating in all of them, I could make it the default very easily, not have to reset it manually for each one. Incidentally, just my personal preference, but there's some things I do in my touchscreens that I really like to do. For example, I always put in the word line type instead of just using the color, because I think it's just helpful to see for each line: sale, sale, order, order, layaway, especially if you do those different line types all the time. So it just keeps that information visible and not just color coded. Because I find when you add an item to the ticket under that line type, you only see the blue color on the very left border. You don't see it for the whole thing. So seeing the word order, just helpful to know where you did it. That's one of mine. The other one I like to put in is unit retail and the price, because if this customer were, say, in my demo here, they're a contractor, I can have a discount apply. Let's pick a contractor. And it just did the price reduction. So I can always compare my retail price with the price this customer's getting. My little picadillos about this. But for some people who do serialized inventory, you might have the serial number show. I use selling unit because in my demo I'm often showing the ability to sell and alternate units. So when I sell that mulch by cubic yard instead of cubic foot, I want to see that selling unit on the screen. So again, personal preferences. It also depends on if you're using those features in the system, but it's nice to then see them. Rafe asked a question: is there a way to show order notes without going into the edit window? There is a way for order notes to appear on the order form or transaction documents. So in terms of viewing them, I'm only aware of using the edit window, but in terms of like having them show up on a transaction document, that's certainly just a configuration. So that's fully supported. You could, for example, create a white space down here and have a note appear, or have all your notes appear if you wanted to do that. That would be a customization to the totals area in the system, but that would be another way to do that. I don't think that there's a way to see it in like a zoom. That would be another option, but you're not going to see that because there's no order zoom, or document zoom. So hopefully that gives you a couple options. And for the customizing this base totals area, that's just HTML code. It's not ridiculously complicated, but sometimes depending on what you want to see, we have to then check for notes before they'll show up in there. So we're running a quick little routine that does what's a step we call hold and recall to make sure that all the information on the transaction's already remembered, and then we can check, and if there is something to show, we render it in that space.
Perfect. All right, so we're just a couple minutes past the hour, so we just wanted to say thank you to everyone who showed up for this webinar and who have been showing up to our other webinars. We really love doing these and having you here. So please feel comfortable if you have something you would like to see in a webinar at any point in time. Just email us, rapidcares@rapidpos.com, or me, bliss@rapidpos.com. Happy to put together a webinar for a topic that you're really looking for. So thank you again.
And the more you ask us, the more we get better at the system. When you ask us a question, we have a nice group within our company that all kind of love to latch onto a problem and find different ways to solve it. So challenge us, make us work. Again, really happy to do that.
Yep, we really do enjoy it. Alrighty, thank you everyone. Take care.